Welcome to the Professionals of the Inland Empire show with your host, John Tulac.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Professionals of the Inland Empire, which we affectionately call PI. I'm John Tulac, your host of this wonderful program, international business attorney located in Claremont, California. And each week we bring you usually two, but sometimes one, when we have a very special guest, a professional who lives and works in the Inland Empire. And today is really special because we have someone who used to live and work in the Inland Empire, moved on to the great outdoors of Texas, involved in the space program. So my very special guest today is Janice Spruce, who is not exactly a rocket scientist, but she could be. She's a rocket engineer. So welcome, Jana, to Professionals of the Inland Empire. It's great to have you today. Everybody sit back, relax, and enjoy a slice of pie. Here we go. So Jana, tell us who you are, what you do, how you do it, and how you got there, because it's a great story.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me on. Still have lots of good friends in the Inland Empire there from my time there. But for me, I wouldn't even call myself an engineer anymore. I'm much more on the business side, but having that understanding of the engineering piece, especially working in the space industry, is really critical. I started out with aerospace engineering, worked in commercial satellites, actually in the South Bay area, Southern California. Then went on to do an MBA at UCLA, worked in some startups in various forms, including Eclipse Aviation in Albuquerque. Then I came back and was living in the Inland Empire, doing some consulting there, and also worked at Collins Aerospace there in the Inland Empire. Collins then sort of recruited me to come to Houston, Texas, where I was helping with next generation spacesuit development and helping them win the next generation spacesuit contract. And then from there, I came to the Austin, Texas area to work for Firefly, which is a newer rocket and orbit and lunar lander company. And at Firefly, I had the great honor of being the vice president of spacecraft, including their Blue Ghost lander, which landed on the moon last year, about a year ago.
And congratulations in order for that. That was a great flight.
Yes, thank you. It was good to stick the landing.
Yes. Those in the Olympics and following that would know exactly what that's all about.
Yes.
And failure is not an option. So how did you get into the space industry? As you started out, you had some choices. Of course, aerospace had kind of gone into decline in Southern California after being a bedrock of growth in Southern California in the 50s and 60s into the 70s.
Yeah, I was always just really inspired by the things that human beings can make. I get really excited. My kids get embarrassed if, a fighter jet flies over. I'm, leaning out the window, woohoo! Just really, really cool. The things that we can build, that we can master the laws of physics and really, push our capabilities. And so that led me to, aerospace, dabbled around a bit, in some different areas of space, but kind of in other industries, defense side as well, but kept kind of coming back to the space side. And space is really, if you like a challenge, it's really some of the hardest of the hard problems, because there are just a lot more constraints when you're dealing with such a harsh environment once you get off the planet.
And we get used to space operas like Star Trek and Star Wars and all that, and it all just looks so easy as we can just warp in and out of every situation in an hour. But space is tough, and getting off the ground is hard. I mean, I grew up with the space program. My dad worked for Aerojet, and he was in procurement and on the Saturn V program. So it was always something top of mind in our household. And I just became an avid follower of the Mercury, then Gemini and Apollo program, and then the development of the space shuttle. And I still to this day see that searing image of the Challenger exploding because I was watching that launch. I just lived, eat, and breathe the space program for decades.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about the American space program is how inspiring it's been. I'm really looking forward to Artemis and getting kind of back to that, where we're doing things that are exciting and inspiring to kids, like you, like me. The space shuttle program certainly influenced me as a kid, seeing what we were able to do. I thought being an astronaut would be cool until I learned more about it, and then I decided maybe that's not for me. There's some tough things about being an astronaut, but I love the fact that we can make those things happen and make them accessible. And that it inspires a lot of kids to, study, math, science, and go that direction.
Do you think that that's happening again today? There's been renewed attention to space because of all the private companies being successful with launches, including Firefly. But I don't see, or at least I don't think I feel that same kind of impact on young people. That it is certainly not the same as my generation growing up with it.
Yeah, of course. And not yet. I think, Firefly's landing didn't include any humans, and the human element is always just makes it feel that much more personal. Firefly, I think, did a great job of really looking at highlighting the team and talking a lot about the people who were sitting on console and flying the spacecraft and the people who designed it. It's kind of fascinating. I enjoy going out and talking to kids when I get the chance and telling them, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work at a rocket company. We need welders. We need people who know how to sew. We need people who can, build a wire harness. There's a lot of very hands-on types of things and wide varieties of work. We need contracts people. We need procurement people. So I think that, there's still a lot of room to inspire kids to do more hands-on real world things by getting them involved in the space industry. And I'm hopeful that Artemis will do that. I think as we send people back to the moon, that's going to bring back the really amazing, footage and pictures that will get people excited. So we'll see how NASA does with promoting this next launch, which is right now scheduled for, early March. So.
Yeah, it's been delayed a number of times, and I know that everyone is considering safety top of mind, and well, they should. But yes, I think we're all getting anxious to see NASA back in action with manned flight. So yes, I'm very excited about it. You had mentioned Collins and Collins being in the Inland Empire. I mean, that seemed to me to be a well-guarded secret that nobody knew that we had that company working very actively in the space program right in our own backyard.
Yeah. The facility that's there in the Inland Empire mainly did chemical detection. So they did a variety of products, both looking for chemical weapons on the ground behind behind an army vehicle, all the way to the other side of it, which is monitoring the air, both in submarines as well as on the ISS. So the air monitoring equipment on the ISS that's making sure that the air there that is acceptable for the astronauts to breathe, monitoring that on a regular basis. That's all the equipment built right there in the Inland Empire. And you can imagine that, you take a big tin can, you seal up both ends, whether you launch it to space or you stick it underwater, you have the same issue. You can't roll down the window and get some fresh air. So having to be very careful about what they take with them. There are approved and unapproved materials for what you can take to space. And so they're watching a lot of those things, and they can detect all kinds of interesting things by what tiny amounts of different things pop up in that air monitoring process.
Well, as a lawyer, I have to point out that you can actually roll down the window, but you can only do it once.
You will leave if you roll down the window. So
it's not habit forming.
Yeah, it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Not at all. It creates a much worse one. But you raise a good point about the linkage to other things. The space program has spun off so much technology, and we've gotten so many products, some of which became part of our everyday consuming lives as a result of research and development that was specifically initially designed for the space program.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of products, and there's also a lot of talent. There's a lot of people who go into engineering or assorted fields because they're inspired by that. And they may not end up actually working in the space industry, but it gets people interested. And I think at a younger age, that's really important. Otherwise, you end up with there's a lot of kids nowadays who, what do you want to be after school? And it's, a barista or influencer, because those are the only things they see. So how do we get to the point where we can show them there are other types of careers, other fun and exciting jobs that you can do that are inspiring and fun?
And I think that's necessary because it does seem like our young people today, particularly college graduates, recent college graduates, they're facing a tough job market to begin with. And then you have the uncertainty of, will AI take all these entry-level jobs away? So you need inspiration and you need direction. And this seems like one of those areas where there's always going to be a need for people who can develop skills and be big contributors.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I've found working in the space industry is that probably the last 10 to 20 years we've kind of pushed everybody to go to college, but now we're suffering from that a little bit, because what the industry really needs is those hands-on workers, and they don't incur a lot of debt going off to school, and they can make really good money pretty quickly after high school. So finding ways to, find those kids who do enjoy working with their hands, they like making things, and they want to be a part of something special, like a space company. I'm hoping that we can get back to doing more of that.
Well, I remember all of the specialty shops that existed in Southern California supporting the space industry, meaning machinists who could get the tolerances down to such extreme levels that
Hmm.
that wasn't something that an ordinary machinist could do. It took further refinement of
Yeah.
both the skills of using machinery and developing the machinery to actually be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so where did they all go after aerospace left? Is a really good question, because some of them were truly remarkable people.
Yeah, we are losing some of that talent, just as that population ages out and there's nobody to hand it off to. So I think that, some companies, especially bigger companies, can afford to do those types of programs where they're trying to bring in more younger talent and make sure that those early career folks get a chance to spend some time, with what I call the super tech, right? And those people to me are incredibly valuable. The technician who can weld, can build you a harness, can assemble things. I've had early career engineers who say, oh, Jen, I think my design is ready. And I go, well, did you have Melvin look at it? Because he's the one who can tell if you can put that together or not, right? And he can usually look at a drawing and go, nope, that's not going to work, and my hand won't fit in there. So
Right.
that is a
Very
big
practical
value.
thing. Very practical things. So I had no mechanical aptitude, since economics and law school were the right directions for me.
I
But
have teenage boys right now, and they just sent me a meme yesterday that's got a guy looking under the hood of his car, and it says mechanical engineer trying to fix his own car, but there's no calculus. So you need those hands-on skills, and even I would argue you might even have better procurement people if they had done a little machining, or that they don't need to be good at the hands-on stuff, but enough to understand it and have kind of been through it
understand.
and can appreciate what they're asking for, how to make it a little cheaper, how to negotiate things between the supplier and the engineers. That could be, they could add a lot more value by having a little bit of hands-on experience.
Right. So one of the things that you were doing when you were consulting, when you were living here at the Inland Empire, was the importance of a good business culture, a good corporate culture. And it seems to me that one of the features of a good corporate culture today has to be training, to bring in and teach young people the necessary skills, because they're not getting that kind of training in high school or college.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies do that internally when they can't find it. I think I was just at a meeting today with an educational institution that's looking at how do they they call it demand side, right? Like what do the companies need, and can we sit down with a company and design their training package for them, especially if they have big enough needs. But not every company has a big enough demand for those types of skills to really inspire a whole program. But there needs to be a little more work on that pipeline overall. for those skills for training. And then, the biggest thing, in my opinion, that you can train, but it's very hard to grade, is grit. I think that's what, especially a lot of the new space companies are craving, is people with grit. Show me that you've done something. And you know what? If you broke it, that's even better. Because show me how, you built something, it broke, and you had to go figure out how to fix it. And then when you fixed it, it actually worked, right? Show me that learning process and your ability to overcome failure and challenges and to dig into the meat of the problems and do real problem solving. And that's for technicians or engineers, right? Across the board.
Exactly. You have, if you don't break anything, then you don't innovate. I mean,
Yes.
Innovation's all about initial failures until you
Right.
finally put all the pieces back together in a way that then works in the way that you either were hoping or expecting it would, or in some totally unexpected ways, like, oh, serendipity time.
Well, and what it's all about now is moving fast. There's a lot of pressure in the space industry and a lot of industries. And we'll see, I think, that pressure continue, and somewhat assisted by AI. How do I move faster? And I think that one of the important ways that you do that is to, when you're laying out your schedule, when you're making a plan, go tackle the hardest thing first. Don't wait till the end and do all the easy stuff that you know how to do because it's comfortable. And then all of a sudden you squish down your schedules to where, now you've put even more risk into it by waiting to do the hard thing last. And I think what SpaceX has done a good job of, and some of that, culture certainly showed up where I was at Firefly, and a lot of companies that are trying to move faster, is you have to identify what's the biggest risk, what's the hardest thing. And I'm going to go try that first while I have time to break it a couple times before I get to the end. And all the easy stuff, the simple brackets, do that last. A lot of engineers get nervous and they want to do the easy stuff first, to make progress. But you got to kind of break that mold, make them less afraid of failure and, eager to go do that early.
Right. Well, I think that's really good advice from the C-suite on down, not just necessarily in the engineering side of the company, because we've become so risk averse. And if you're a public company, it's all short-term earnings and quarterly figures and so on, where you don't get the space, part of the expression, that's what we're talking about, different sense here, to expand your horizon for taking those risks, taking those chances, see whether something will work or not work. And I mean, even a place like Disney seems to have gotten so risk averse, not very daring in their programming anymore.
Yeah. I think that's very true. I think a lot of companies are worried about because of, information is available so readily and can spread so quickly. They don't want bad news to get out. Either internally or externally, right? If the email about your failure, gets all over the company, nobody wants that. And a lot of those companies, frankly, have taken on a culture of, you get promoted for being safe, not for taking risks. You often can't find anybody at the higher levels of the bigger, slower corporations. Often that's what you see, is that those higher level managers and executives can't point to a risky thing they've done that they pulled off, right? It's more that they didn't rock the boat.
Exactly. And of course, lawyers advise about risks all the time and are generally risk averse, but without any undertaking of risk, there's no innovation, there's no
Right.
entrepreneurship, there's no development, there's no growth, there's no nothing.
You're just going to do what you did yesterday.
Right. So it is about identifying and then managing those risks properly and knowing how to mitigate or to cut off risks. We say, well, this is not going well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely some great advice out there from an engineering standpoint that also applies across business, which is, challenge those requirements, those things that are making your life difficult, right? Whether it's a design requirement or it's, a legal requirement. Have we interpreted this in an overly strict way that's slowing us down or costing us a lot of money? Push back on those things, because sometimes there's wiggle room there, and finding out how you can push on those things that are driving you to do things that are not that productive or not that fast, as a first step, can be really important.
Absolutely. I want to circle back to the idea of training uh, young graduates, and let's just focus on engineers coming into the profession. Having taught civil engineers for a lot of years, the law of engineering, it seems like there's just this narrow-minded focus that if it isn't in the building code, you can't do it. You can't even think about doing it. And of course, the building code is obsolete the day it's published. So dealing with that kind of attitude, it's hard to overcome that inertia of, oh, we can't take any chances. But where architects, on the other hand, say, I'll design a pyramid to stand on its head. It's not my job to build it. That's just my engineer's job to figure that out. So trying to put those two together can sometimes be a real challenge. But it seems to me there may be an opportunity, and maybe aerospace leads this. It's like if you're going to bring back those skilled areas of technicians and so on, you have to bring it inside, and you have to train them the way you want to train them, and give them something long term. It's like, we don't want you changing jobs. We want you here
Yeah.
for a long time, as opposed to the typical college grad, has 7 jobs by the time he or she is 30, and 3 of the 7 involve making coffee.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing in the aerospace side is that grades don't matter as much. I'll say that. Depending on which company you go to, they may have cutoffs for GPAs, but most of them will waive that if you can show up with an amazing portfolio of work. So if you have shown that you've built rockets, you built a CubeSat, you reworked your car, and you have a project truck and you've redone everything on the truck, and you can walk into an interview and show them the things that you did and what you learned from it. Again, that grit, I think, and the ability to just go get things done. Most of the especially new space companies care more about that than did you sit in class every day and memorize the formulas, right? Because I think, especially going forward, I hate to put it this way, but knowledge is going to be cheap, right? Because everybody's got an AI in their pocket, or eventually the companies are all going to have their own internal AI. And so, there's experience, which is maybe a step above knowledge, how to apply that knowledge. So I think that our new grads are going to have to show that they not only acquired some knowledge, but that they were able to apply it and then gain some experience that's going to make them, that much smarter the next time around.
Right, since everyone can access information, with these large-scale language models, large learning models, and so on. So AI is in everybody's pocket now. It's just a click or two away to access. It's then going to be how you interact with this vast library that makes the difference between someone who really succeeds and moves on and someone who's treating AI simply as a crutch.
Yeah, yeah, definitely true. I think it's going to be an interesting ride, I think, over the next few years as we watch that, really accelerate, and what kind of skills then come out of that as being, more important, more valuable. In my mind, it's at least for the near term, hands-on abilities and hands-on skills are going to be far more valuable than somebody who, again, got a great GPA, but just sat in the seat. Or even, I think a lot of the projects and things that kids got pushed to do more recently that aren't directly applicable to an engineering career are largely discounted. You did fundraising, who cares, right? You started a business, okay, that may be kind of interesting, but did you build something and break it, right? That's how many things did you build and break? Show me a portfolio of your work. Those are the things that are going to be more meaningful, I think, in the near term for those kids, coming out of school, to be able to really land a cool job in the place that they want to work.
And for the more experienced business person and looking at hiring and looking for places of opportunity, I can't think of anything that really is more compelling than the return of aerospace to Southern California, and by extension, the Inland Empire. I mean, here's your reshoring, all wrapped into one industry. It's like you're not going to go to China for parts if you've got a space contract going, you're going to end up wanting to machine your own parts, design your own parts, and have them built here. It seems to me this ties to national security. It ties the whole idea of bringing manufacturing back to the United States, and the Inland Empire is well suited location for that. We should be excited about this.
Yeah, a lot of it does come back to workforce, and companies decide often where to locate, a new facility or where their headquarters for their startup is going to be based on the capabilities they have to hire the people that they need to keep up with their growth plans. And so Southern California certainly, hopefully hasn't lost too much of that in recent years. But a lot of it, was there and hopefully can continue to be revived. I mean, if you have a contract with, the Space Force, for example, you're not allowed to buy anything from China. Like it right. Cannot be on that spacecraft or that rocket. So yeah, that does certainly give a push to build up that national capability.
So the competition among the private space companies, I think, is intense and is likely to remain so. Does this help NASA as well, or is NASA just going to end up playing second fiddle because it's always going to be starved for resources?
I think, yes, NASA's going to have a challenge for resources always. Just, everybody does, right? Got to decide what your priorities are. The difficult thing is NASA has been pushing hard more recently to be one customer of many, and they're very encouraging of a commercial type of model, which is great, except that all the money for the things they want to do still come from NASA. So until launch costs have come way down, which makes it more accessible for different types of business models. That's helping. When we reach out to go back to the moon, there's not a huge business case yet for going to the moon. There's tourism. There's a few rare things like helium-3 that are valuable enough that you can it's cheaper to go to the moon and get it and bring it home than to find it and or create it here on Earth. But there's not a huge market yet for that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that develops. And it may be more driven so by the Department of War and the military side than by NASA, just because China's already going there. China's landed on the far side of the moon. We don't really know what they're doing there. They've been able to return samples from the far side of the moon, so they're a little bit ahead of us, frankly, right now when it comes to the capabilities with the moon. But that's probably not a good long-term plan for the United States, because whoever gets there and occupies that real estate is going to find the high value real estate, and then they start to make all the rules.
Well, now I'm intrigued because that's location, 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 like any real estate agent will tell you.
And it's so on the moon because there are some places that are closer to potentially accessible frozen water ice. And if you're going to the moon, you got to pack everything with you. Well, if you can pack something that makes you water, you now have not only something for astronauts to drink, but you can also make fuel. And so that's why that's particularly interesting, because now you don't have to take all your fuel with you. Imagine if you were going to go on a camping trip and you only got one tank of gas. You got to fill it all the way up and that's it. That starts to be very limiting when you got to carry all of that fuel with you to get there and to get back. No gas stations. No stops. Although gas stations in space is a thing too that's being talked about. So,
well, now that sounds intriguing. Is that somewhere out around a Lagrange transformation point? It's like, okay, it's nice and stable right here.
L1 and L2 are actually good places to put your. They're kind of like the high ground, right? Where you can just park and sit and watch what everybody else is doing.
Okay, now we're back to Star Trek at the space cantina.
Yeah, that one, I don't know, man. That's going to be interesting someday. Who's stopping in for drinks on the moon? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, well, in low gravity, can you drink more? I don't know how the chemistry of that works.
Yeah, I have to think about that. That's a good one.
We'll have to come back for a second round of discussion.
Yeah,
Sort that
I
one
think
out
on the
there.
International Space Station, NASA has greatly limited their abilities to do that type of testing, I'll say. I'm not sure the Russians have followed all through.
No, vodka is the Russian fuel.
Well, you know, the Italians, when they went to the space station, they complained you couldn't get a decent cup of coffee. And so they had a little Italian company make an espresso machine that would work in microgravity. So they could get a good cup of coffee. And then one of the astronauts also invented a little cup because you can't drink out of an open cup on the space station because your drink would just flow right out. So they use surface tension, and the kind of the shape of the cup is a little bit bent. It's kind of like this. And that way that you can smell your drink, because oftentimes that's just as much of the flavor and the experience of your hot drink, tea or coffee, is to be able to smell it, as a part of as opposed to sucking everything through a straw, which, just isn't nearly as romantic.
I guess not. Well, see, these are practical applications in one place, and they seem kind of silly out of context, but it leads to stuff that then gets applied down here
Well,
in
here
so
you go.
many
Maybe
places.
your listeners can try it out, tomorrow morning, hold your nose and pour your coffee and take a drink. It's not the same, right?
Not the same. They would never be the same. Again, good smelling coffee is part of the wonderful
Part,
experience.
part of the experience.
Well, Jen, I want to thank you for being my guest today on Professional the Inland Empire. This was a very enjoyable conversation, very stimulating, gives people something to think about. We really need to think in terms of our priorities, and aerospace needs to be one. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being my guest, Jenna. So long for now.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for watching or listening to, depending on the case, the Professionals of the Inland Empire show with your host, John W. Tulac. If you have a suggestion for a guest, email him at jwtulac, that's JWTULAC @gmail.com. jwtulac @gmail.com.